Today we'll be looking at AnyAustin's video, Finding the Edge of the World in Zelda. I love AnyAustin. I think he is one of the most unique gaming related content creators on all of YouTube. I love that he kind of explores these really niche angles in video games and things that most people just kind of overlook or don't even think about. So, yeah, let's go ahead and watch it.
Question for you. How many of these classic Zelda games let you see the edge of their world? Like a
All of
place where
them.
you get to stand and stare off into
All of them, I'm assuming, if he's showing them.
the distance beyond the boundaries of what's actually in the game. There are obvious ones like Tears of the Kingdom or Wind Waker, but it
Dude, I really like Wind Waker. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is good too, but man, I remember Wind Waker was so cool because you're just exploring the water. And I did have the guide, so it kind of had like the map or whatever. Maybe I printed it out or something, but yeah, I just remember like going through it was just different, when most of the Zelda games most games in general are like land based. You're just kind of traveling across like large swaths of land to have like a ocean based game was pretty cool. And it was just a different take on Zelda, to actually be able to go through the water and find islands and ships and stuff. It was just a unique version of Zelda, I think.
turns out if you know where to look, you can actually find a place like this in every single one of them, including the one that's not even 3D. So that's what I want to show you today. Places in these 7 fantastic games where seeing the edge of the world is actually possible, and how Nintendo's approach to hiding the edge of the world has evolved from simple walls of rock on the NES all the way to incredibly weird, giant, unexplained pits.
I remember this gorge. I don't know if it's in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I remember the gorge being there, like where the Forgotten Temple is or whatever it's called in Breath of the Wild, where all the guardians are. Um yeah, like that gorge is weird. And I get like now that it's kind of like a dividing line, right? It's to stop you from going any further past that point. But it was just still kind of weird in the game, right? It was just kind of a weird area. But what I want to know is how much of the older games, like the pixelated games, like the SNES games, how much can you see past the map? So obviously it's probably all square, right? So you have like a square map and you can't go past these points on the map. But how much can you see past the actual playable area? That's what I want to know. Like, and how did they divide it? Did they just do trees? Did they actually have a hard cutoff? You just can't go past that point. Was it black around it? Like a black edge. That's kind of what I was curious about.
In Tears of the Kingdom. The first game where Nintendo actually started to grapple with this problem, believe it or not, was the hit 1991 video game, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. The original Zelda and Adventure of Link both technically had edges of the world, but the nature of those games means that the idea of seeing them wasn't really possible. But about a third of the way through A Link to the Past, guess what happens? You fight the game's main villain for the first time, and after you defeat him, he transports you to a different dimension called the Dark World. As soon as
I remember going to this pyramid thing and I'm like, why am I in Egypt? Like, it's kind of a weird, I'm sure it means something, when they developed the game, but it was just kind of weird to like be transported like this pyramid thing.
you get there, you
And I guess I never really noticed that in the background is kind of, I think he's going to talk about it, but like, is the setup for where you would go later.
will be on top of a pyramid, and if you stop and stand in place for a moment, you will notice something amazing. This is the first time Nintendo decided to let us see the edge of the world in a Zelda game. And we know it's the edge of the world because if you look closely, you can actually make out this tiny little tower here and then a little bridge, which is actually a place you can go in the game. All the way on the northern edge of the map where Ganon's tower is, you can find this tower and then the mountain and then this bridge that goes across it right here. It lines up perfectly, far away in the distance in one of the greatest video game sunsets ever. Now, the funny thing about this is that if you actually look in-game on the map itself, that tower, Ganon's tower, is borderline right next to the pyramid that you're actually standing on top of when you see it in the distance. If we assume that Link is about 6 feet tall and then we measure the distance between the top of the pyramid and the actual location of that tower in the overworld, we'll find that it's only about 600 feet apart, which is about the distance between both ends of a Walmart, I'm pretty sure. But this is the nature of 2D games. They had to use these tricks to imply...
Just Walmart, though? Not any other store? I don't know, but Is Link 6 foot? I mean, I don't know if it's ever confirmed. I know that in Ocarina of Time he looks tall, but you know, in Breath of the Wild, he looks a significant deal shorter in the newer games. So, what is the 6 foot based on? Like, which form of Link is this? Because he looks taller in Twilight Princess and in Ocarina of Time, but maybe a little bit shorter in some of the other games, and then a great deal shorter in the newer two.
Distance, and you can actually see this black void here on the map, which is where they put that sunset scene sort of underneath it. So even though you're looking down at the map, the way that it scrolls makes it look like you're looking out into the distance, which is obviously very cool. But this is the only moment in the game that they do this.
I appreciate that he appreciates the small details. I think that's what I like about him is like, most people are never going to talk about this or really care that they went through this, work to make this look this way. But the fact that he, finds that cool and it's a small thing, very cool.
They give you one little taste of it, and then the rest of the game is spent with your head down, immersed in the world itself. But they couldn't rely on these 2D tricks for very long, because just a few years later, it was time to transition into 3D with the release of the industry-changing The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And
Man, this game, blew me away. I played it probably not long after it came out. I didn't have an N64 growing up, but my grandparents did. And I went to stay with them for I think it was a month or something one summer. And they had the N64. And I remember that, I just remember playing it any free chance that I got just for hours and just trying to figure it all out because I didn't have a guide or anything. They didn't buy it. Obviously, they're older. And they actually bought it for one of the other grandkids. But I just remember playing it for hours and getting stuck and getting frustrated and leaving an area and coming back, trying to figure out how to get through the forest, trying to figure out how to just advance the game or get through some of the dungeons because I was a kid. So, but just, I don't know, it's so iconic. Just like Final Fantasy VII was for me, as an RPG, Ocarina of Time was as an action game. Like the melodies, I still remember all the melodies, and I still remember just going and taming the horses and, trying to find the Skulltulas and, that kind of fighting Ganon at the end. It was just so iconic. I think my favorite part was that you could ride the horse. I think that's the coolest thing.
Ocarina of Time is really where solving the problem.
And it made me want to buy an ocarina. So I know he says ocarina, but I wanted one really bad when I was a kid because of this game. A lot of kids probably did after playing this game. I never got one, sadly. I've had a chance to buy them, obviously, as an adult. And I'm like, honestly, I would never play it. So it might be a cool centerpiece or something, but
of hiding the edge of the world really starts to change how they design the games on a fundamental level. You'd think that having a video game in 3D would automatically make the world feel bigger and more connected. And in some ways it does, we have a sky now, which is great. But when you step back and look at it, Ocarina of Time is actually more restrictive than A Link to the Past in terms of letting you see and experience the edge of the world. Every area.
I wonder if that's because it's 3D, right? Because you can only see what's rendered, right, to a certain degree. But two, now you have textures in front of other textures. If you're even this scene right here where it's kind of got, this dip or whatever, you can only see so high, in the distance. You can only see so high past the textures that are in front of you. Whereas when you're looking at a 2D, map, you see everything that's open to you. Sorry, because it's all on the same level. But in a 3D game, that's obviously not the same because there are textures in the way, but also, it can only render so far. And there's, 3D elements, so there's different heights. So
in this game is set in a bowl or a canyon or a cave, someplace with high walls and no sight lines to anything far in the distance. The reason for this is technical, of course, and it wasn't just Ocarina of Time that had to work around this problem on the N64. But what's interesting about Ocarina of Time is that, like A Link to the Past, they do offer you one single spot in the game where if you turn to face the right angle, you actually do get a scenic view of, technically, the edge of the world. world. It's up here on the road to Death Mountain on top of this little rock formation. Once you get to the top, stop, go into first person, and turn around, and then you'll be greeted by one of my favorite views in Ocarina of Time. This is the only place in the game where you can see the edge of the world. You can
I don't think I ever noticed that. I'm pretty sure I never turned around to look at Kakariko Village.
actually see Kakariko Village down here, and if you have a few drinks, you might even be able to make out the path that we took to get up onto the mountain. Yeah, stuff like this is just so cool to me. This is on an emulator now, which is why it looks worse. These places where a game creates a fake artistic representation of another area in the game for you to see from far away, like the theme park in Mario Sunshine or that big giant building in Half-Life 2. It's just...
There's another example of this in San Andreas. So if you've ever played Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, there's a glitch, I guess you could do. And I remember doing this when I used to have the game years and years ago. And you could you go into a building with a jetpack, and it took you to, this fake area from what is it? It's not Los Santos. What's the area from Grand Theft Auto 3? Well, whatever that city was, you could, there's a mission in San Andreas where you go to that city, but it's really just like this section, right? That's separated from the actual map of San Andreas, that you run this one mission or one set of missions in that's supposed to be the area from Grand Theft Auto 3. But it's not actually obviously Grand Theft Auto 3, and it's only this one little area that's rendered. Well, once you do the mission, you do the mission, you're teleported there to do the missions, and then once you finish the mission, you go back to regular San Andreas and you never go back. Well, with this glitch, you can actually go up to it and walk around in that rendered city of Grand Theft Auto 3, that little section. You can actually go in there. There's people, there's cars. Well, I don't remember if there's cars, but I'm pretty sure there's people up there. And you can't see it from the ground or anything, but you can get to it. And it's supposed to be Grand Theft Auto 3, but it's obviously just a little section of it that they put separate from the map of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
So cool. And it works both ways, because if we go back down to Kakariko Village and we find a spot to look up at the mountain, we can probably guess that we would be standing right about here on this flat mountain texture while looking back down at the village, technically, which is a neat thing to try and visualize on such a primitive texture. Another fun detail is that if you wait on the mountain until nighttime, you can actually watch the lights in the Kakariko Village houses turn on, like a little Christmas village. That's such a fun touch. But to me,
that's pretty cool. But if it's an artist rendering, or if it's just a rendering of Kakariko and not actually Kakariko, did they do that on purpose just in case you were looking at a distance? Or is it because, if you're looking at it from far away, they want to simulate the real town? I'm assuming that's what it is. It is also interesting that they all turn their lights on at the same time. It's very, very synchronized.
By far, the most mind-blowing thing about this beautiful view is something that took me 30 years to notice. If you come down the mountain a bit and look off to the right here, you'll see this empty patch of grass way off in the distance. I always thought this was just like a throwaway space, like some sort of unfinished texture that we weren't meant to look at, but no. This...
No way. Wemby rookie card. Gem Mint.
The probability of me understanding this is 0.
You should AI that with Copilot.
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Is Hyrule Field. We can see Hyrule Field, Kakariko Village, and Death Mountain all from one place in Ocarina of Time. My mind is... kaboom, exploded. I know it doesn't look like it based on my face, but it is. And that's not even the edge of the world. The edge of the world is up on top. It's not much, and there's basically no detail at all, but there is nowhere else in the game where you can even have a little bit of a chance to contemplate what might be going on beyond the confines of the game you're playing. Maybe somewhere over these hills is where the Happy Mask Salesman is from, or where Impa took Zelda when they ran away from Ganondorf in the middle of the game. We'll never know for sure, obviously, especially because if you actually look at the map in the game, they cover everything outside the playable area with clouds. But I did find this...
It's very convenient that there's clouds all around it.
This old, very cool, and highly detailed Japanese map of Ocarina of Time that technically shows that on the other side of the mountains would be the Kokiri Forest. Kind of an interesting thing to try and visualize. I am really curious how they're going to handle all this stuff in the remake of the game, in the new remake. Maybe we'll revisit this topic when it comes out. I don't know. What I do know is that if you look at this same spot in the 3DS remake of the game, they didn't really change much, but they did make it more detailed, including adding Lon Lon Ranch to the Hyrule Field area and more clearly outlining Gerudo Canyon on the right side there, which is very cool. And for good measure, here's just another comparison of the mountain from down below in Kakariko Village. I just like seeing these kinds of comparisons. I feel like these are the types of things that most graphics comparisons don't end up showing off, but this is what I want to see. But regardless, whether
That is pretty cool that they would, kind of keep all those details and, just kind of upscale it, obviously. But I wonder if they had like notes about it, to reference the things that they need to make sure are still in the game. I wonder how much of the original game they still, try to keep, like what gets kept and what doesn't.
it's the N64 or the 3DS, this little area is still the only place in the game where Nintendo allows you to have a view like this. Pretty neat. Just a year and a half after Ocarina of Time, Nintendo somehow managed to put out the next and possibly best Zelda game of all time, which is of course The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And
So I never got to beat this game. I don't know if about you guys, but like I started it and then I just never beat it. I think it's because the copy of this game wasn't mine either. I heard it's really good, but it's definitely weird because don't you have to beat the game like at a certain amount of hours or something?
Majora's Mask does do a little bit more with letting you see further than its predecessor, sort of, especially when it comes to seeing Clock Town from various points around the map. My personal favorite instance of this is the ranch here. If you zoom in past the tree line, you can see the ice mountains over there on the left, what I think is the stone tower to the right of that. There's a little bit of Clock Town right below the moon, and then Woodfall Mountain on the right side. So you can actually see a ton of Majora's Mask from this location. Now, interestingly, using an upscaled version
Why was there two of them? Oh, is it because he was referencing the original one?
of the game with the CRT filter removed, you can actually tell that the two objects that are further away geographically are these flat, blurry textures, whereas the closer locations, Clocktown and Woodfall, are tiny 3D models. Kind of interesting. But Majora's Mask does do one thing that Ocarina of Time never did, and in order to see it, we've got to go to the beach, which means we need to turn into a fish and put on our swimsuit. Wow, what a nice swimsuit. Wait, oh my god, are those MeUndies? Welcome to the sponsorship. MeUndies are the greatest underpants in the world, okay? You should buy them. I have told you about this 100 times already.
I would cut this section out, but the man's got to make a living, so I'm going to leave it. The one thing I want to say is, man, that was kind of creepy when Link was turning into that dolphin. Like I said, I never beat Ocarina of Time, so...
At least. But apparently there are still people out there who haven't taken the plunge yet because MeUndies keeps coming back to partner with me for sponsorships, which I'm very grateful for, of course. MeUndies, I will never do you wrong. I hope I get to work with them forever. As usual, all of my MeUndies are in the wash when I'm filming. I don't know how that keeps happening. I am wearing my last pair of clean ones right now. No, I will not show them to you, but I have 7 total pairs so that I can wear one of them every single day of the week. And sometimes if I forget to do my laundry, which I actually currently am forgetting right at this very moment, I get legitimately
not what I was expecting to see.
Annoyed because I have to wear my backup underwear and it's just not even close to being as good. Nobody does it like MeUndies does it, okay? If you use my promo code, which is of course AnyAustin, you can get some MeUndies for a very reasonable price, and on top of that, if you don't like them, that's fine. You can send them back for a full refund as long as you're normal about it and you didn't get them all dirty. Don't try them on when you're dirty. Be reasonable, okay? Go to MeUndies.com/AnyAustin and use promo code AnyAustin at checkout to get up to 50% off your order plus free shipping. That is MeUndies.com/AnyAustin, promo code AnyAustin. Give them a try. They really are that good. If you go to the beach in Majora's Mask, you will see the first Zelda game to actually let you walk up and look out at the edge of the world intentionally all the way to the horizon. It's not the most impressive thing ever, obviously, but this is different than what we've looked at so far. This is us seeing the edge of the map while standing on the edge of the world, and we're supposed to know that it's the edge of the world. It's not some weird high up place that we're looking out into some skybox. This is it. We are here. And the effect is pretty good, at least if you have the CRT filter on. If you take the CRT filter off and see it in full HD detail, it becomes extremely obvious that these rock formations and all this stuff is like 100 feet away from you, rather than distant objects out in the ocean. But hey, that's why we love CRT filters.
Well, It would have been cool if they had some like islands or something, even if they were just rendered or, you know, it was like flat and there wasn't actually something there. It'd be kind of cool to see like something in the distance because I'm sure somebody would boundary break it and go over there, but
And you know, using water as the edge of a game world is smart because it's very easy and it creates a completely realistic way to hide the invisible walls that are a necessity in any video game. It's like the perfect solution to covering up the edges of the world. And what this makes me wonder is what it might be like if you made an entire game where the edge of the map was like this, just a vast, flat ocean. I think you know where I'm going with this, because that's exactly what Nintendo did with the next
no
3D
idea.
Zelda game, the iconic open-world sailing game, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. For the first time in series history, Wind Waker gave players what was effectively a 3D open world. You can take your boat and sail all the way to one side of the map and then all the way back to the other with no clever tricks or anything like that. It really is just a big open space. The trade-off, of course, is that every side of this map, every single edge of this world is exactly the same because the world itself is a big flat blue square. In effect, they're hiding the edge of the world by not really having an edge of the world. It's a very clever cop-out, and it works really well, I think.
It is kind of cool that it's like accessible from the beginning of the game. I think there's a few spots that you kind of have to progress to get through, but I mean overall, you know, I wonder if this game in particular kind of gave them some idea of sandbox because it seems like this game came out and it was very open world, right? Very sandbox. But then Twilight Princess, I feel like, was not as much of that. So it's like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess are more so like linear. There's some exploration, sure, but it's more linear. But then this was world like way open. But I don't know if he's going to talk about that.
The best place to experience this vast emptiness is down here in the southeast corner of the map because that's the furthest away that you can get from any given island, which gives you this nice clean view of the vast expansive ocean. If you try to go any further, your boat warns you that there's no point and that it's too dangerous before forcing you to turn around and go back into the main area of the game. If you're feeling brave, you can actually jump out of your boat and keep swimming beyond the edge of the world, out into uncharted territory, but it isn't very long before you either need to turn around and get back to the boat or you will just drown. Now, technically, because of Phantom Hourglass, we do know that there is canonically a world beyond the edge of the Wind Waker map, but when Wind Waker originally came out, we did not know that. And Nintendo doesn't really put a lot of effort into making us curious about it. It's not like they talk about...
That's kind of a cool detail. I guess I never really knew that. I never played Phantom Hourglass.
Other continents, you know, openly very often in these games, and they only vaguely allude to other cultures or other places in the world. So despite the fact that the edge of the map...
I should have, too. Hold on. Okay, so listen. I should know all this, okay? I don't know where my webcam is. Okay, I got this like a year or so ago, and it talks about, but I mean, it doesn't explain every single thing, but it does explain like all the games. Um, you know, it's got like kind of I think the timeline. I don't know if it has the exact timeline, but it's got a lot of the art, and it's got a lot of. I guess I can show you guys. Man, oh, I tried to draw Link. I had one of those drawing books as a kid that shows you like it shows you like characters and it shows like the wire outframe and then you like draw the circle and then the lines and then you draw the body parts. I had that for all the characters for Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I'll just show you some of the pages. I don't know which way to go. Oh, that's from the show, I think. If you guys ever want me to go through this, just let me know. Maybe I'll just spend a whole video series just going through it. Here's some of the But yeah, I mean, I never honestly have taken the time to actually go through the whole thing. Like I've flipped through it, um, and then just never finished it. Oh yeah, it also has this comic in there. I think it's for Skyward Sword. So yeah, maybe I would go through that for a video. I wanted to get the Elden Ring books from, I think it's Mayfair or something like that. I don't remember what it's called, but there's like Elden Ring like art books and they talk about the story and stuff. But yeah, pretty cool.
Game is so available, I don't actually remember spending that much time staring at it when I played through it as a kid, even though I do tend to do that in other open world games. Now, full disclosure, we are using footage from the Wii U remake of Wind Waker, which I don't quite like as much as the original in terms of how the edge of the map looks, but I don't have a save file in the GameCube version, so this little glimpse that I took from the opening of the game on Switch 2 is the only taste that you get. But you can tell that the colors on the GameCube version are deeper and overall just a little bit more impressionist and nice looking. And above all, the clouds in the GameCube version, really, really good. They kind of bungled, what am I saying? They're bungled those for the remake. Now, for whatever reason, after the Wind Waker, Nintendo decided that letting us see the edge of the world was a bad idea after all. And as a result, we ended up with 2006's The Legend of Zelda Twilight.
Okay, so he does address it that, yeah, it seems like, yeah, Twilight Princess was more linear. Twilight Princess was cool. I liked it. Me and my wife actually took turns playing Twilight Princess, and I liked the addition of Midna. She was a cool character.
Princess. At first glance, the design of Twilight Princess looks a whole lot like Ocarina of Time, with lots of canyons and bowl-shaped areas to hide the edges of the world, only on a much larger scale. Hyrule Field is the best example of this, because while it's technically just a giant bowl with walls blocking your view on either end, it's so large that it gives the impression that you're seeing beyond the horizon, even though you're not. Everything you see from Hyrule Field is stuff that you can go visit in the game. But there is one spot in the game where you actually can see beyond the horizon, and it's right back here down this path. Down here is a mysterious amphitheater in Hyrule Field with a couple of goblins that you can kill, and as far as I remember, there is only one part towards the end of the game where you have to come here for a little puzzle, but it only takes like 30 seconds, so effectively this is not a location that you'd really remember. Except that on the edge of that amphitheater, you get this beautiful view of Lake Hylia, and way out there in the distance, the edge of the world. Just like Ocarina of Time, you can
Oh, that's cool. I wonder if that bridge is the same bridge in Breath of the Wild, like the big bridge that you have to cross.
see some renditions of distant game areas like the Gerudo Desert, but there's one thing here that makes this spot different from every other 3D Zelda game: these mountains in the back. As far as I can tell, these mountains are the only time that Nintendo intentionally put a specific object way out in the background of a Zelda game, past the edge of the world, that isn't just a representation of another area in the game that you can go. This is the first time that they've said to us, hey, there might be a world out there, and here's just a little bit of it. It's not just aesthetic decoration, it's not just an extension of the desert that fades into the distance. These mountains are a specific object that actually stand out, and they have an identity of their own. It kind of reminds me of looking at that little tower out in the distance of the Skyrim remaster, or those creepy little gremlins on top of the mountains in Mario Galaxy 2. It probably doesn't mean anything, right? But it kind of seems like it might when you look at it. Now, was this intentional? Probably not. They probably just thought it looked awkward without something down there, so they threw some mountains out in the distance. But this is the first time that they shifted from hiding the edge of the world to actually using it to show us something. And in fact, it was the only time that they would ever do that, because
That's pretty cool. I mean, just the idea, like kind of like the Wind Waker thing, like in Phantom Hourglass, it's like there was something beyond that. But to think that as well, like when I was younger, I actually boundary broke. I think it was Fallout 3. It was either New Vegas or Fallout 3. I used to like glitching in video games. And so in Fallout, I think it was Fallout 3, and there's a pile of rubble in one of the cities, and I just kept jumping on the pile of rubble, and eventually I was able to climb it and then fall through and walk out. And so you just basically are walking out in the desert, but you're like kind of clipping through it. It's weird. And I always wondered, like, what is past it? Because, the games, they build up these stories, right, of these areas that you're in. And I always wondered, like, oh, okay, well, what is beyond that? And I always thought it was kind of weird that games are kind of sandboxing you in any way. Um, you know, like there's all these worlds beyond it, but you can't go to them. Obviously, the game can only be so big, and you know, the story is kind of self-contained. But it's just interesting to me to think like, what is beyond, you know, the area that we're currently in? Because there's got to be, you know, it's part of a whole world. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
The next and last 3D Zelda game before the modern era, which is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, switched everything up completely again. This time, instead of hiding the game's edges
never
from the
played
player
this
like
one.
Ocarina of Time, or picking a setting that wouldn't require them to hide it like they did with Wind Waker,
I heard Skyward Sword is great. I've never played it. And I think canonically it's like one of the earlier ones. It may be like the first one. But I know it's like earlier in like the timeline.
Nintendo did both. They had the wide open expanse of the Sky Islands, which lets you fly right up to the edge of the world, at which point you'll hit an invisible wall. And then they had the surface areas, which are much more restrictive with lots of high walls and interior locations. And it's those surface areas that I want to focus on here, because at first it can really look like the game is doing the same thing as Twilight Princess. You can see lots of distant green mountains in the forest area, lots of red volcanic mountains out in the distance in the fire area. But I think there's a distinction here. The background objects in Skyward Sword are all part of the theme of the area that they're in. The forest has green forest stuff in the distance, the volcano place has orange volcano stuff in the distance, and so on. Now, that's not to say that it's as simple as Ocarina of Time, but Twilight Princess Distant Mountains were not part of the theme of the area. They were a totally distinct object that signaled to you that there was something different and concrete in the distance. This one difference actually means that the way Nintendo covered up the edge of the world here creates a kind of abstract feeling environment rather than a concrete one like Twilight Princess. And I think we know this was kind of intentional because of the art style of the game. If you remember, Skyward Sword on Wii had this incredible trick that they used where objects in the distance would flatten together into this watercolor painting effect as they got further and further away from you. Here's one of my favorite examples. You can see how the mushroom things in this area are all like smudged up and kind of abstract looking in the distance, but then as you run towards them, they sort of, you know, come to life and become 3D. And it makes
That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool like aesthetic for a game. And it's like Skyward Sword isn't cartoonish like Wind Waker is. So it's kind of interesting that they had like this like almost pastel look to
made
it.
everything in the distance of this game feel flat and cozy and kind of weird, and it made the edges of the world feel like they were part of the skyboxes rather than these actual objects that you were seeing out in the distance. And I really think it was one of the coolest looking Zelda games because of this. Sadly, and this is just me ranting now, but sadly they effectively removed this artistic stylization from the Switch remaster of the game, and it does kind of change the way the atmosphere hits you. Not to say that it ruins the game by any means, but it just changes the vibe. Oh well, whatever. Still a good game. Which brings us to the modern Zelda games, and perhaps the end of the era of Zelda games having to hide their world edges, with the release of Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom. Over the course of this video, we've seen Nintendo employ a bunch of fun tricks to solve the problem of covering up the edge of the world in their Zelda games. But with the release of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, which I'm using for footage, there was a fundamental change in the way that they chose to design the world because they made the game properly open world. These weren't little sectioned off areas with loading screens or a bunch of tiny separated islands covered up with all of these big wide stretches of ocean. These games are one solid open landmass that can be walked through in any direction, climbed across freely, and crucially, we are now totally free to explore the edge of the map and see the edge of the world at any time from pretty much any place.
Did you guys ever do bomb jumping? I have it on this channel, but if you never did it in Breath of the Wild, not Tears of the Kingdom, although you could do some cool stuff with the you know, the ability to put stuff together. Man, bomb jumping like was the funnest way to clear the map. I remember that method came out like during COVID or something. And once me and my kids learned it, we were just doing for hours, just bomb jumping like across the map in Breath of the Wild because it was just fun to do, man. But it made exploring like it kind of breathes new, you know, breath. It's a breath of fresh air into Breath of the Wild.
In Tears of the Kingdom, it's even possible to get up really, really high, which lets you see well beyond the edge of the map and out into, something, whatever it is. The world beyond the edge in this game is really mostly just a bunch of clouds with a few very featureless mountains poking out here and there. And to me, these mountains are much more in line with Skyward Sword's background decorations rather than Twilight Princess's, statement piece mountains. They're beautiful, they're very nice, but they don't quite feel concrete to me because they're so featureless and faded. Now, in terms of the actual edge of the world itself, Nintendo chose to handle it in 3 ways. There's a desert section that just goes off into the distance forever with this invisible wall and a sandstorm that covers up your view depending on the game. Then there's the coastline, which has an infinite ocean that stretches forever into the distance with nothing to see. This is the same cop-out that Wind Waker uses. It's the same cop-out that GTA uses. Classic open world choice. But the big one, and the most important one, is up at the top of the map. And it's the giant canyon that I mentioned at the start. I think I speak for everyone when I say that we all think this giant canyon is weird. It's just so clunky. It almost feels like amateurish, like they built it in 10 seconds using a big terrain brush in whatever tool they were using to develop it, and then they just forgot about it or didn't care. And I actually think that's kind of what they did. For the first time ever, I think Nintendo decided not to hide the edge of the world. They're not trying to trick us with clever angles, and they're not using a cop-out solution of just making everything ocean. For whatever reason, this time around, they just said, hey, we don't want the player to go beyond this line. And then they just took a big stick and just and went and just drew a massive, totally unrealistic, really weird feeling line in the sand. And to me,
maybe they did. Maybe they didn't, or maybe they had a plan for this area and they just, maybe it didn't work or something, or maybe they just decided not to use it, or they didn't have another good way to separate the terrain from, the playable area to the place, like the area you can't. And then to kind of compensate for that, they filled it in with things like the Forgotten Temple or Ancient Temple or whatever it's called. And then Lionels and some enemies and some stuff that you can find and a few different missions. I'm assuming that's what they did. They decided, okay, you can't go past this point. We're just going to make this big canyon because we don't know what to do here. We don't have anything else. And then we're just going to put stuff in it so that if you do go explore this canyon, it's worth your time. But it's, I think he's right. I think they just didn't really have another good way to fill it.
Me, this idea is really the thing that has always
or to separate it, I should say.
Separated Nintendo from their contemporaries. They know what they care about, and they know what they don't care about. They do care about the feel of a game. They do care about how their games look, in a sense, and they care about the way that you navigate the world. But man, they don't care about realistic world design, really. They don't really care about creating a believable space.
I'm assuming he's saying this because he has other videos about Zelda games and how they're not realistic in the way that the water flows. So I think in one of his videos he talks about the water never actually makes it to the ocean or something, or there's no actual origin source for the water. I don't remember. I don't even know if I saw that video. But I know he did one about Zelda.
It's just not their thing. And sometimes they'll try to work around that to accommodate what they think the market wants. That's what I think kind of happened with Twilight Princess, which is why it has a much more concrete world, including the things beyond the edge. But at their best, I feel like Nintendo just goes, we just want the edge to be right here. What's it called? New Donk City is a great example of this. They didn't try to make it seem like anything other than a floating, realistic city. They just go, hey, we want the map to be done right here. This is the end of the map. And the developers just go, okay. And I think that's hilarious. I'm AnyAustin. Thanks for watching.
All right. That's it for the video. What do you guys think? I think it was a great video. Again, I really respect him for just going out and researching things that people probably wouldn't really even think of. But yeah, let me know in the comments. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. God bless. Bye.